Hi Blockheads, welcome to month 3 of your Block of the Month Chocolatier. This month we're going to make 2 blocks just like last month. We're going to use 2 different colors and white, and this is the block that we're going to construct, the first one. It's called Eccentric Star, and as you see it has pink, kind of a salmony color, and white. So what you received in your packet was a strip of pink, a strip of salmon, and a strip of white. You need to cut that up into the pieces that it says on your directions, and here's what you'll end up with. You should end up with 4 salmon colored squares that are 3 1/4 inches. You should end up with 2 pink squares that are 3 1/4 inches and 2 white squares that are 3 1/4 inches. And then 1 2.5-inch salmon square, and that's the very center. Okay, the center is that square I showed you. The rest of these are what are called half-square triangles. And that's all we're going to do is construct half-square triangles to make this cute little block. It sort of looks like a pinwheel and sort of looks like a star. I really kind of like this one. Okay, the first thing we have to do is we have to draw lines that we're going to sew on. And what I'm going to do is show you 2 different methods to draw those lines. I'm going to use a friction pen, and remember, a friction pen goes away with heat, so once we're ready to press these seams open, the lines will go away. And I'm going to use what's called a magic wand, and this is really easy to use. What I do is, if you can see, there's a little like darker center line, and I put that line from point to point, from one corner to the other corner. And then I'm going to draw the lines on either side. And remember, with the friction pen, you can go back and forth, but always lightly. You don't want to scrub real hard. Okay, now I have my lines that I'm going to sew on. If you don't have a magic wand, you can still get this same effect. It just takes a little bit, an extra line and a little bit more time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little tiny mark right at the corner and right at this corner. Okay, now I'm going to take a regular ruler, or you could use any kind of straight edge, and I'm going to line that straight edge up. And notice that what I'm doing is lining it up so that I allow for the width of my pen. So I have the ruler edge along sort of the left edge of the mark I made. That way I know I'm going exactly diagonal corner to diagonal corner. Now see, my line goes right through the corners. Okay, now that's the center. That's not what I need. I actually need these 2 lines that are 1/4 inch away from the center. So now I'm going to take my ruler and put my 1/4 inch mark on the line I just drew, and then mark that line on this side of my corner to corner diagonal, and now flip it and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now I have the same thing, only I have an extra line on here, and that'll be my cutting line. Okay? All right, now we need to sew them. And what you're going to do is you have 4 salmon colored squares. So you're going to match up the 2 white ones with 2 of the salmon, and you're going to match up 2 of the pink ones with the salmon color. And I've already drawn the lines on these. Okay? Now we need to sew on all 4 of those lines, or all 8 of those lines, 2 on each. Okay, what's most important is we need them to be matched up exactly. Okay, square to square, and I'm going to sew along this line. And I'm going to use a method called chain piecing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew on this line, and when I'm getting close down here, I'm going to grab my next piece and just start to feed it underneath my machine. Okay? I'm going to lower my needle so I know I'm exactly in that on my line. And now I'm going to just sew one, and then the next one, and the next one, until I have all 4 of these sewn on one side. All right, I've got them all ready to go here. Okay, now that I have them all sewn on one side, I have a neat little tool here that reuses an old rotary cutter blade. And all I do is lay them on top, and it cuts through my pieces of thread in between. Okay, now I need to go back and do the same thing sewing the other side. All right, now we're ready to cut our squares in half on the diagonal and then press the seams open. And what we need to do is we need to make them finish at 2.5 inches. So I've already done these. This is what we're going for. It's our finished squares like this. Okay, the one that we did using the 3 lines, now we're just going to cut on that middle line. Right? And the one that we use the magic wand, all we do is we line up our ruler corner to corner and cut. Okay, so now I have white and salmon colored squares. Now I need to press the seams open. Press them like that, and our friction pen line went away. Now we're going to press them open. Do that with all 4 of these. And remember, always press as you sewed, right like this. And that shrinks the stitches in nice and easy. You can actually feel the difference between the stitches here and the stitches here. So try that experiment and see. Then press them open. Sometimes the hardest part is to get it to come open.
The nails match the square.
They do. Okay, and last one. Now what we have to do after we have these all pressed open is we have to square these up. We need them all to measure 2.5 inches. Okay, so now we're going to do 2 cuts to do that. Okay, the first cut, there's more to pay attention to, I think. What I want is I want this line, this 45-degree line on my ruler, exactly along the seam line. And I want to be able to cut a little bit off the top and the sides, but I also want to be sure that I'm beyond the 1.5 here, so I'll have a little bit to cut off on this side, on these 2 sides as well.
The 2.5.
The 2.5. I'm sorry, not the 1.5, the 2.5. So this 45-degree line is right along my seam line. I have a little bit extra to cut off here, and I'm noticing that at the 2.5, I have some extra to cut when I do the other 2 sides. So I'm going to cut this side, and I'm going to cut the top. Okay, now I'm going to rotate it so this becomes my bottom corner, and I'm going to put that 45-degree line back on. But now I have to put the edge of my square along the 2.5 mark as well. Okay, so notice the 45-degree line along the seam line and the 2.5 square along the edges of my square. And now I cut the side and the top. And don't let go of your ruler here until you're sure you've got everything trimmed up. Okay? Now I have a 2.5-inch square. I'm going to do it again. Okay, the first time my line goes this way, I'm going to line the 45-degree line up right on the seam line. I'm going to have a little bit to cut here, and I'm going to notice that I definitely have some to cut off on the second round. So cut, cut, and again be sure I can pull that away before I move my ruler. Twist it so that now my trimmed corner is down here. Now, my trimmed corner has to be at the 2.5 and along the 45-degree mark. So I just keep messing around until I get everything lined up. And then cut and cut. Okay, we're going to do that. I'm going to continue and do that same thing to these two as well. Now we're ready to sew the block together. I've laid it out in the correct manner. I use this as my guide, but you're going to use the picture in your directions as your guide as to how to lay the block out correctly. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to sew this together in rows like this. Now, a couple of things we got to remember is we want this block to finish the correct size. So if at this point all of these blocks don't measure 2.5 inches square, you're never going to get your block to end up to be 6.5 inches when you're finished. So let's talk about that scant 1/4 inch. We've discovered a couple things. First of all, if you have a machine that allows you to move your needle position, you want to play with that until you get a scant 1/4 inch. Okay, so cut yourself some strips, sew them together and measure them and make sure, just like we did the very first week. Do that same exercise. Cut yourself a lot of strips and play around with the needle position. On a Janome machine, when you have it set for straight stitch, you can move the needle position by changing your stitch width. Okay, that would be here. On this machine, it would be that you would change your stitch width here when you bring it up. So you would do it here. That would move your needle position over. So you want to make this number larger on a Janome machine. So if you don't have a Janome, look in your book, see if it addresses changing the needle position. Okay. Now, the other things that contribute to you don't keep your raw edges together. So remember to keep your raw edges right together as you sew this. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sew this row together, and this row together. And then you're going to press these seams out this way, these seams in towards the middle block, these seams out towards the outside blocks. Then you're ready so that the seams will nest when you sew this row to this row and this row to this row. And then when you're done with those and everything's lined up, nice and square, then you'll press those last two seams open and you should have a perfect 6.5 inch block.